The footage is ordinary, almost painfully so. A white sedan pulling into a driveway on a quiet street in East Point, Michigan. Two figures stepping out into the cold night air. Pay attention to Zion Foster, 17 years old, walking into her cousin's house at 11:15 p.m. on January 4th, 2022. She's moving without urgency, without fear. She doesn't look back over her shoulder. She doesn't hesitate at the threshold. Why would she? She knows this house. She knows the man who opened that door. She trusts him completely. This is her favorite cousin, and she is 17 years old, and she is going to hang out with family, and there is nothing in the world to worry about tonight. Nobody watching this footage could have known what was about to happen. 105 minutes later, Zion Foster was gone from the earth. Her body has never been found. What happened inside that house on the night of January 4th is something only two people ever knew. One of them is Zion, and she is gone. The other sat across a courtroom and cried. Were those tears real? That is the question this case leaves open. And by the end of this video, I want you to decide for yourself. Sierra Milton was a mother of 6. That detail matters, not as a statistic, as a portrait. 6 children, 6 lives, depending on one woman. A household that required structure, rules, trust, and honesty. Sierra ran a tight home, not because she was cold, because she loved. Zion was the eldest, 17 years old in January 2022, a 12th grader at East Detroit High School. She had just celebrated her birthday the November before. She was working a serving job at Detroit Wing Company. She was saving money. She was building towards something. She was also a teenager, and like most teenagers navigating a world that felt simultaneously too large and too small, Zion had pushed back against the walls of her mother's house. The year before, she had run away twice. The first time, frustrated with rules and reeling from her grandmother's cancer diagnosis, she left for her grandmother's house. Convinced to come back, she stayed only days before leaving again. Sierra called the police. Both times, it turned out to be manageable. Teenage rebellion, grief in motion, nothing more. That history would later be used against her. The night of January 4th, Zion came home from her shift, changed her clothes, and asked permission to go out. She was honest about where she was going. She told her mother and her boyfriend, Vertez Gonzalez, exactly who she would be spending time with. Her favorite cousin, Jalen. Jalen Brazier was 23 years old. He lived in the same general area. He was, to all appearances, family. Zion trusted him completely. Sierra trusted him by extension. So when Zion walked out the door at shortly before 11 that night, her mother let her go. That was the last time Sierra saw her daughter alive. At midnight, Zion sent Vertez a single text. On my way, he wrote back throughout the night. Messages left unread, calls going straight to voicemail. By 8 in the morning, he was writing things like, "Are you alive? This is the worst thing ever." Sierra reached out to Jalen immediately. His response was strange from the start. He said he had not been with Zion the night before. More than that, he said he had not seen her, had not spoken to her in years. Sierra processed this slowly, because what Jalen was describing was impossible. Her daughter had told her she was spending time with him once or twice a month for over a year. Either Zion had been lying to her mother every single time, or Jalen was lying now. One of those things had to be true. Jalen leaned into it. He told Sierra her daughter had been using his name as a cover story, that it was sneaky as hell and not safe. He suggested Zion was probably at someone else's house nearby, someone Sierra did not know. He helpfully suggested she go to the police, but he asked, very specifically, to be left out of it. Vertez was not willing to let it go. He confronted Jalen directly, because Vertez had something Jalen did not know about. Location data. Zion shared her phone's tracking with her boyfriend, and at 11:24 p.m. on the night of January 4th, that location had placed Zion directly across the street from Jalen's home. Vertez had even taken a screenshot, a single screenshot, taken at exactly 11:24 p.m., that placed Zion at that location. Jalen had an answer for that too. He sent back a video from his Ring camera system. No entries, no exits, nothing showing Zion anywhere near the house. He was prepared for every question. That should have been the first signal that something was deeply, structurally wrong. East Point police, when Sierra finally reached them, were not alarmed. Her daughter had a history of running away. The intake officer told Sierra directly that they were treating the case as a runaway situation. Sierra was on her own. She posted on social media, she organized searches, she put Zion's face everywhere she could reach, and she waited for someone to see what she could already feel. Something was very, very wrong with Jalen's story. Because 2 days after Zion disappeared, there was a moment, a small, devastating moment that cracked the foundation of everything Jalen had built. A neighbor saw Sierra out looking for her daughter, and that neighbor mentioned something they had seen, Jalen Brazier in his driveway, with a girl. Just before everything went quiet, and Sierra remembered something then, something she had almost let slide. Jalen had come to her house, to her actual driveway, not long before Zion disappeared. He had given Sierra a hug. He had been there, physically present, in her life, no distance at all between them. He had not seen Zion in years. He had been in Sierra's driveway. Both of those things could not be true at the same time. Hear how Sierra described the moment that unraveled it all.
He told me he hadn't seen or been in contact with her for 3 years, which is impossible when you were in my driveway and gave me a hug.
That single testimony broke Jalen's first story completely open. He had not been absent. He had been present. He had been in contact. And he had lied, casually and confidently, to a mother searching for her missing child. The question was no longer whether Jalen was involved. The question was how deep it went. Sierra already knew. Every mother knows when someone is hiding something. The question was whether law enforcement would see it before the trail went cold. When detectives finally turned their attention toward Jalen Brazier, what they found was not a grieving cousin. What they found was a man who had spent days building a wall, lie by lie, around the worst thing he had ever done. Investigators pulled the phone records. This is where cases like these begin to crack open. Not with confessions, not with witnesses, with data. Cold, time-stamped, unfeeling data that does not care what story a person has rehearsed. Zion's phone had last pinged at a location consistent with Jalen's address. The cloud recovery data painted a picture the Ring camera footage had tried to erase. Because here is what Jalen had not understood, or had understood too late. Deleting footage does not delete the record of a deletion. Gaps in surveillance systems leave metadata. Timestamps that show activity and then show silence are not blank. They are evidence of a choice. Police recovered data showing that Jalen had not simply failed to capture Zion on his cameras. He had removed the footage. The Ring camera video he sent to Vertez, the video designed to prove Zion was never there, was not the full picture. It was a curated version, a performance, from a 23-year-old who had convinced himself he was smarter than the systems closing around him. He was not. But that conviction, that deep and load-bearing certainty that he could outthink every person and every piece of technology in his path, had been visible from the very first hours. Not in the interrogation room. Before that, on a police body cam, in the earliest moments of the investigation, before anyone had formally named him as a suspect. This is where the mask first begins to slip. Not because he loses his composure, because he never loses it. And that is the tell.
The times when I left is when I took her to work and we came back, went to get gas. Just basically showing this girl was never in my house. So
we believe, man.
And she's known to be a runaway. Like she's ran like 4 times, and every time she got some dude's house. Her mom knows this. Her mom's just playing it a certain way, and it's making me so fucking uncomfortable.
She's known to be a runaway?
Yes, I would assume you guys would know that.
Listen to what he just did. He did not say Zion. He did not say my cousin. He said this girl. She, her. A 17-year-old who had used his name as her safe word with her mother for over a year, who had trusted him enough to show up at his door after 11 at night, had already been reduced, within hours of her disappearance, to this girl. And then watch what comes next. He does not grieve. He pivots. He redirects. Her mother is playing it a certain way. It is making him uncomfortable. The framing he is building, in real time, on a recorded body cam, in front of law enforcement, is not the framing of someone devastated by a cousin's disappearance. It is the framing of someone managing perception, someone deciding, in the moment, which version of this story positions him best. He is doing it out loud, on camera, with complete confidence that it is working. That confidence is the signature of a particular kind of thinking. Psychologists who study this behavioral pattern describe it as a failure of consequence imagination. The person in question is not unaware that consequences exist. They are simply unable to fully believe that those consequences will ever reach them specifically. Every system, every person, every piece of technology becomes something to be handled rather than something to be feared. The Ring camera footage is handleable. The phone data is handleable. The grieving mother is handleable. The body cam officer standing right in front of him is handleable. He handled all of it, right up until he did not. When detectives finally brought Jalen in for formal questioning, they walked into that room already holding more than he realized. And Jalen, who had spent days projecting calm, projecting confusion, projecting the grief of a cousin who simply wanted Zion found, now had to sustain that performance under direct, sustained, professional pressure. He began to shift. The language that had already started moving on the body cam footage now moved further. In the days between Zion's disappearance and the interrogation, Jalen had occasionally still used her name, in text messages to Sierra, in public statements, in the performance of concern he had been running for the family. Inside that interrogation room, even that disappeared. She became that girl. That shift is not accidental. It is not careless. Disassociation under pressure is a documented behavioral response in individuals who are protecting a lie that involves a specific person. Sustaining emotional warmth and language requires effort. Sustained, conscious effort. Under direct professional pressure over extended time, that effort collapses. What replaces it is distance. Clinical reference. The subject of the lie has to stop being a person in the speaker's language, because keeping them human requires energy the speaker no longer has available. Zion had been becoming that girl since the body cam footage. The interrogation room simply made it impossible to hide, and the detective in that room knew exactly how to use it.
I was trying like psychedelics, like acid, and
Okay.
I think that's what killed her.
Do you? Did you have like a freaking momentary, like, didn't know what you were doing moment?
No. She also she took a time herself.
But let me ask you this. The problem with those drugs are, when you're on them, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, that's the reason people take them, right? Did you do something when you were, because again, I'm trying to figure this out, and that would make complete sense. When you dropped acid, did you have, I'm not saying it's okay, but...
I was completely comforted. Completely. I just think, I don't know if the effect for her was positive, or, because I know it does a lot in things your brain, and like with your...
Yeah, it does a lot. I'm going to tell you right now, it makes sense to me now. It all makes sense to me. You understand that, right? Because I'm sitting here trying to figure out how this nice young guy, Jay, could ever hurt anybody. But it makes sense to me now. It's not you. That's not Jay at that point. You understand that, right?
Yeah.
If you did something under the influence, that I need to know that, because that's a big difference, and I can understand that. That I can appreciate.
That technique has a name: minimization. The detective is not calling Jalen a monster. The detective is offering him a door, a version of events where what happened was understandable, where the substances he had taken explained everything, where the jury would see a young man in crisis rather than a predator making choices, where being a nice young guy and having done something terrible could coexist. Jalen walked toward that door. He admitted the psychedelics. He admitted something had happened. And then, in stages, in a voice that kept searching for the version that made him least culpable, he told detectives what had happened inside that house. Zion had come over. He had let her in. During the night, she had become unresponsive. He described watching her breathing fade, watching her heartbeat grow faint. He said he panicked. He said he did not know what to do. Then he said what he did.
Her heartbeat was getting very, very faint, and her breathing was like non-existent. So, and mind you,
all other vaccinated.
all I smoked, all I had was weed, normal marijuana. So I freaked out. I'm like, okay, well, this looks terrible. This looks very bad. I didn't know what to do. So I took her, I put her into my trunk, and I put her in my trunk.
Okay.
In my car. And I took her to Highland Park and put her inside of a trash can, and then I left.
Sit with that for a moment. She was not breathing. Her heartbeat was fading. And the choice he made, the only choice he could land on, was not to call 911, not to call her mother, not to drive her to the nearest emergency room. The choice was to place a 17-year-old girl into the trunk of his car and drive her to a trash can. That detail matters, because it is the detail that tells you everything about who Jalen Brazier believed himself to be in that moment. Not a frightened young man, a problem solver, someone managing a situation, someone thinking not about Zion, but about himself. He disposed of her. And then he went to sleep. And then he woke up and sent Sierra messages about how sneaky it was that Zion had used his name as a cover story. The psychology of this requires a moment. Narcissistic self-preservation does not always look like sociopathic coldness. Sometimes it looks like presence. Jalen attended the searches. Jalen expressed concern. Jalen positioned himself as someone who wanted Zion found, because the greatest threat to his safety was not law enforcement. It was Sierra, a grieving, searching, relentless mother who already did not fully believe him. Keeping her close, keeping her directed elsewhere, was tactical. Every expression of concern was a tool. Every hug, every condolence, every text message offering theories about where Zion might have gone. It was management, and it almost worked. Because here is the part that should make every person watching this genuinely furious. When detectives first investigated, there was no immediate arrest. The case moved through an institutional maze of jurisdiction and classification, and the quiet bureaucratic assumption that a teenager with a runaway history had simply run away again. Sierra Milton, a mother of 6, who knew with absolute certainty that something had happened to her child, was navigating that maze alone, posting flyers, organizing searches, calling media, fighting for the basic recognition that her daughter was not a statistic. She had a history of running away. That phrase, that single administrative phrase, used as a reason not to look too closely, not to move too fast, not to treat Zion Foster's disappearance as the emergency it was. The system that was supposed to protect her daughter had handed Jalen Brazier extra days, extra time to be helpful, extra time to be visible and concerned and present, extra time to ensure Zion was never found. When Sierra finally forced enough attention toward Jalen, when the data and the timeline and the physical impossibilities in his story became undeniable, detectives moved. But by then, Zion had been gone for weeks, and what she had been left inside of was not a place anyone could recover her from. There is a specific cruelty in choosing a trash can. It is not random. It is a statement, whether Jalen intended it as one or not. You put something in a trash can that you are finished with, that you no longer consider worth anything, that you want gone. Sierra heard what Jalen had done before she heard it in any official capacity.
He said that my baby just died, and then that he threw her in a dumpster like she was trash.
Those are words a mother should never have to form in her mouth. Those are words that should not exist in any universe where Zion Foster had value. And Zion Foster had enormous value. She was 17. She was working. She was loved. She had a boyfriend writing to her through the night, "Are you alive? This is the worst thing ever." She had a mother who never stopped moving. She had a life, and it was treated, by the person who ended it, as something to be managed and discarded. Detectives now faced a case without a body. This is where cases like this become extraordinarily difficult to prosecute. Without a body, there is no definitive cause of death. The defense had room to argue that maybe Zion had simply died, maybe she had a medical episode, maybe Jalen had panicked but had not killed her. Room that, in another jurisdiction, in front of another jury, might have been enough. What detectives had was the trail Jalen had not been able to erase. The deleted footage, the phone data, the gash on his collarbone that appeared after the night in question and for which he had no explanation. The timeline that showed Zion's location at his address and then showed nothing because her phone stopped transmitting. The jail calls, where Jalen, already sensing the walls closing, began communicating in code, wrapping his fear in language designed to sound ordinary.
There, the most logical and possible one, right? Is that there's nothing major or new, and due to that, there's a last effort to put together any types of anything.
Keep your head up. Don't say nothing. You could be
Of
lying.
course. Baby, stop talking.
I know. I'm just saying.
I just don't want you speaking on certain things. Okay.
That is the language of someone who knows exactly what he did and is desperately trying to communicate without saying it. The most logical and possible one, right, is that there is nothing major, or new. He is doing math on his own survival, out loud, on a recorded jail line. The arrogance embedded in that call is almost hard to absorb. This is a man who has been arrested, who is speaking on a monitored line, who understands, intellectually, that what he says is being recorded. And he still cannot stop himself from strategizing out loud, because the narcissistic certainty that had driven every choice he made, from the deletion of the footage, to the crafted text messages, to the helpful cousin performance, had not left him. It had simply gone underground. It had become coded. He still believed he could manage this. He was wrong. The courtroom is where every lie Jalen Brazier had ever told was laid out in sequence. Not dramatically, not all at once, methodically. The way prosecutors build a case when they do not have a body, piece by piece, thread by thread, until the picture is so complete that the absence of a body stops mattering, because everything surrounding that absence points in one direction only. Prosecutor Ryan Elsie stood before that jury and said something simple and devastating. There are only two people who can say exactly what happened inside that house that night. On January 4th, and the moment Zion Foster disappeared from every system designed to track the living, one person had been there. One person had made choices in real time that determined whether Zion would ever be found. And that person was seated at the defense table, watching a prosecutor dismantle every wall he had built.
Now, there are only two people who can say exactly what happened inside of the house that night. One of them is Zion, and she is gone. The other is the defendant, and you will hear that nearly every time he spoke about what happened, his story changed. And although he got rid of Zion's body, you will see that he left behind a trail of digital evidence that is damning and will show you that the circumstances all lead to one and only one explanation for why Zion left his house in the trunk of his car that night, and that's because he murdered her.
Jalen's defense had a theory. Zion had died of natural causes, a seizure, possibly. Vertez had testified that Zion told him she suffered from seizures and was on medication for them, that she had warned him that missing her medication would make the seizures worse. The defense leaned on this, on the possibility that Jalen had watched something happen that he did not cause, that he had panicked, yes, that he had made catastrophic choices in that panic, yes, but that the catastrophic choices were those of a frightened young man, not a killer. The prosecution took that theory apart in front of the jury with something that requires no legal training to understand: common sense.
There's a claim that he did all this, he did what he did because he was afraid of getting caught for marijuana, afraid of getting busted for pot. You can use your common sense. If you go to a marijuana dispensary, there's not going to be a team of ATF agents waiting to bust you and take you to federal prison for that. It's about the equivalent of a parking ticket. You ever heard of somebody getting rid of a body to avoid a parking ticket?
You ever heard of somebody getting rid of a body to avoid a parking ticket? That line did not require elaboration. It did not need a follow-up. The logic was complete in 11 words. Jalen's stated reason for not calling 911, for not getting Zion help, for putting her in a trunk and driving her to a trash can, was that he was afraid of being caught with marijuana, in a state where marijuana had been legalized, where the consequence of possession, as the prosecutor noted, was roughly equivalent to a traffic citation. He threw a 17-year-old girl in a dumpster to avoid a traffic citation. Either that is the truth, or it is not. And if it is not, then there is only one other explanation for why Zion left that house the way she did. The prosecution also pointed to the physical evidence that Jalen could not explain away: the gash on his collarbone, unexplained, present after the night in question, not mentioned in any of his initial interviews, not attributed to anything, just there, on his body, a mark that had no story attached to it. In a case built on digital breadcrumbs and behavioral tells, that physical detail sat quietly and said something the rest of the evidence had been building toward. Something had happened in that house that went beyond a young woman simply dying. Something had required force. Jalen took the stand and did what he had been doing since the moment Sierra first messaged him about Zion. He performed, he wept, he used language designed to make himself sympathetic. He spoke about fear and panic and not being prepared for a situation like that. He said there was no way to prepare for something like this. He said he reacted stupidly off of fear. He did not say he was sorry. Not in the way that sorry means something. He acknowledged that his apologies would mean nothing, that you cannot change what has been done. But there was something carefully absent from everything he said in that courtroom. There was no moment where Jalen Brazier spoke about Zion the way someone speaks about a person they loved. There was no moment where the grief was for her. The grief, in every statement he made, was for himself. And now he was performing it for 12 strangers who had the power to determine the rest of his life.
One, I did turn myself in. Yes, I lied, but I was not in the right state of mind. There was no way for me to prepare for a situation like that. I was scared. I don't know exactly how she passed, what caused her to pass. I just know 1 minute she was cool, she was fine. She laid back for a minute. Next thing I know, she was dead. I don't know what caused it. I did not cause it or anything like that. I reacted stupidly off of fear and panic like I've never felt before in my life. Literally.
You think she dies and then you dispose of the body? Just like that? That was your choice?
Did not know what to do. I sat for at least 10 minutes sitting there. Like, what do I do? Who do I call? My kids are upstairs. We just got into this place after struggling for like 2 years to get it, and everything is falling down.
I won't have any conversation in this court.
And I wish I could take it back. I would have called the ambulance, called her mom, because her mom's so sweet. Her mom is so sweet. And I just know, I wish I could take it back. Nobody been in the situation. At the very least, they'd be able to be like, okay, this happened, confirm this. And everybody has some sort of peace right now.
The judge did not let it pass unremarked. You think she dies and then you disposed of the body just like that. That was your choice. Not a question waiting for an answer. A statement of record. Because the judge had seen what the jury had seen. What Sierra had known from the beginning. That the choices Jalen made in those hours were not the choices of a frightened bystander. They were the choices of someone calculating his own survival, while a 17-year-old girl's body was still warm. The jury left to deliberate. Sierra Milton and Zion's family sat and waited. And Sierra, who had been fighting for this moment for months, who had organized searches and posted flyers and forced a case forward that the system had initially been content to leave in the runaway file, sat in that courtroom and tried to hold herself together. She spoke about those minutes while the jury was out.
Why is this man free? What? I can admit to this and still be let free.
Why is this man free? What? She said. I can admit to this and still be let free. That question had been living in Sierra's chest since the beginning, because Jalen had confessed, not fully, not cleanly, but he had admitted to placing Zion in a trunk. He had admitted to leaving her in a trash can. He had admitted to lying to police across days of sustained investigation. And there had been a period, during the legal process, where the question of whether those admissions were enough to constitute murder hung in the air, like something that might go either way. Sierra had watched that question remain open longer than it should have. She was watching it now, waiting for 12 strangers to close it. The jury was out for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. In a murder trial where the body has never been recovered, where the cause of death remains technically undetermined, where the defense had constructed an alternative narrative around seizures and panic and fear, where every piece of physical evidence was circumstantial in isolation. 30 minutes, that number tells you everything about how clear the picture had become.
As to count one, how do you find?
Guilty.
As to count two, how do you find?
Guilty.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, please raise your right hand.
Guilty. On count one. Guilty on count two. The jury foreperson read those words and the air in that courtroom changed. Sierra Milton's body was trembling. She said that herself. Trembling. And then the word came, and it was read. Not metaphorically. The verdict display, the system that shows the outcome in that courtroom, showed the word guilty in red. And Sierra said it was just so matter of fact. like the universe had finally, after all of it, stated plainly what had always been true. Zion Foster was loved. Zion Foster was fought for, and the man who had thrown her away was going to be held accountable. The sentencing hearing came next, and Jalen Brazier, facing the rest of his life measured out in years inside a cell, still could not find the version of himself that took full responsibility. He spoke at his sentencing. He maintained, still, that the death was not violent, that he had never wanted to not apologize, that his apologies meant nothing, but that they existed. He was managing again, right up to the last moment, trying to shape the story. Judge Donald Knapp was not interested in the story. The judge outlined, methodically and without flourish, the full weight of what Jalen Brazier had done. He had left his 2 young children alone in the house the night this happened. He had manipulated and lied to family. He had disposed of a young woman's body. He had lied to police through days of investigation. He had caused delays that may have permanently prevented Zion from ever being found. He had acted alone, and he had demonstrated, in every statement and every choice since, that he was not someone likely to be rehabilitated. Jalen Brazier was sentenced to 30 to 90 years in prison for the murder of Zion Foster, an additional 5 to 10 years for tampering with evidence. Those sentences are to run consecutively. He will be in his 50s before he is even eligible to begin a conversation about release. And that is only if a parole board, reviewing the full record of what he did and how he responded to it, decides he has changed. Judge Knapp did not believe that was likely. Sierra had words for Jalen after the verdict. She did not hold them back. She had earned the right to say them plainly.
My body was trembling, but man, when it was read, and it was just so matter of fact, I was so happy they saw. She was loved. She is loved. She was fought for, and this is the result. So I'm happy. I'm happy that in the end, this is justice.
And for Jalen, you thought you were smart. You tried to be slick. The people saw you for what you are. You ain't. And I hope you never get out.
That is a mother who spent months refusing to let the system file her daughter away under runaway. Who organized searches when law enforcement would not? Who kept Zion's name alive and present and human in a public sphere that had every institutional reason to let it fade? Who sat in a courtroom and trembled and waited for 12 strangers to see what she had always known? She had fought for this, and she had won it, and it was justice, and it was not enough, because Zion Foster's body has never been found. 70 volunteers, law enforcement teams, 6 months of searching a landfill, 6 months of people going into a place full of the things the world has decided it is done with, looking for a 17-year-old girl who deserved a bedroom and a graduation and a life. They never found her. The search was eventually called off. After 6 months, after 70 people gave their time and their energy and their grief, after Sierra had to absorb the reality that she would not be able to bury her daughter, that there would be no grave, no headstone with Zion's name, no physical place to go and sit and talk to her and leave flowers and feel, even for a small moment, close. Think about what that means. Grief has rituals for a reason: the gathering of people who loved someone, the physical act of placing a body in the earth, the marked location that says, here, this person existed, this person mattered, this person is remembered. These rituals are not decoration. They are structure. They give grief somewhere to go. They give a family a shared geography of loss. Sierra has none of that. She has a verdict. She has a sentence. She has justice, the kind that the system can provide. But the system cannot give her back what Jalen Brazier's final act of selfishness took. He did not just kill Zion. He disposed of her. He made it so that the people who loved her most could not hold a complete funeral, could not look at a grave and know, in the wordless way that physical proximity allows, that this is where she is. There are mothers in this world who have buried their children, and that grief is a weight no language can carry. And then there are mothers like Sierra, who did not even get that, who have a verdict and a sentence and an empty space where a grave should be, who have to find a way to grieve something that has no location, who have to find a way to say goodbye to someone who was never officially placed anywhere, who have to hold the knowledge that the last place their child existed physically was inside a trash can and then inside a landfill, and that somewhere in that landfill, she still is. And there is nothing anyone can do to change that. Zion Foster was 17 years old. She had just celebrated her birthday. She was working. She was in school. She was texting her boyfriend and telling her mother where she was going and using her favorite cousin as a cover story, the way teenagers do when they want a little independence without a long conversation. She was so ordinary, so fully, completely, beautifully ordinary. And that ordinariness is the thing that makes this case land where it does. Because she was not doing anything unusual. She was not in a dangerous situation by any definition that the people around her could see. She was going to spend time with family, and family was where she was killed. Jalen Brazier, as of the publication of this video, remains at an intake facility in Wayne County, awaiting placement in a general population prison. He is alive. He knows where he is. He has a location, he has a bed and a meal schedule, and a future, however constrained, that moves forward in time. Zion does not have any of that. And her mother wakes up every morning in a world where that asymmetry is simply the truth, where the man who threw her daughter away is housed and fed and alive, where Zion is somewhere in a landfill that has been searched and abandoned, where the only thing Sierra can hold on to is the verdict and the sentence and the knowledge that she fought and she won, and it still feels like loss. That is the unhealing part. That is the wound this case leaves open. Because closure is a word people use when grief has somewhere to go. When a family can gather around a grave and say, "This is where it ends. This is where we come when we miss her. This is the place that holds her." Sierra does not have a place that holds Zion. She has the absence of one. She has the knowledge that someone decided her daughter was trash, and she has to live with that knowledge every single day, while Jalen Brazier sits in a cell and breathes. She is doing it. She is standing. She fought for Zion when the system wanted to file her under runaway and move on. She forced the case forward. She kept the name alive. She sat in that courtroom and trembled and waited and heard the word guilty spoken plainly into the air. She is doing it because Zion deserves someone who does not stop. And she is not stopping. I want to leave you with a question. Not a rhetorical one. A genuine one. The kind that does not resolve cleanly. When Jalen Brazier sat in that courtroom and wept, what was he weeping for? Was there a moment, somewhere in those tears, where Zion became real to him again? Where she stopped being a problem he had managed and became the person she actually was? A 17-year-old who had trusted him enough to come to his house? Who had used his name as her cover story because she felt safe with him? Or were those tears purely about what he saw in front of him? The walls closing, the sentence forming, the rest of his life narrowing into something he could finally no longer manage or manipulate or reframe. I do not know the answer to that. I do not think anyone does, except him. But I would like to know what you think. Drop it in the comments below. Because the psychology of how someone like Jalen Brazier processes what he did, whether there is remorse somewhere underneath the performance, or whether the performance goes all the way down, that question matters. Not for his sake, but for ours. Because understanding it is how we get better at seeing it before it is too late. Zion Foster deserved better than what she got. She deserved a cousin she could trust. She deserved a system that treated her disappearance as the emergency it was from the very first morning. She deserved to come home. She was on her way. She never made it. And somewhere in a landfill, she still has not. Remember her name, Zion Foster, 17 years old, East Detroit, January 2022. She was loved. She was fought for. She still is.